you would have some serious caveats still on a sharp 2 miles.
Hello, we are back for episode 6 of the 2026 Cheltenham Festival Ante-Post series, powered by Priced Up Bets. Unfortunately, we didn't quite get to our 300 like goal last week, so we're going to go a little bit more conservative this time and say 250 likes would be fantastic. And do remember to subscribe if you haven't already. We're nearly at 4,000, and we'd love to get there before the Cheltenham Festival. We're propelling, we're getting to that point. So it's all very exciting. Of course, it's completely free to click that button. And in this episode, we're going to be reviewing the recent action at Newbury before later in the show, putting up selection number 6 for our Ante-Post portfolio. And do stay tuned for next week's episode because we're going to be looking back on everything that we have covered so far and all of our portfolios, such as they are. As always, Jake and Dan alongside on the Jump Show. Jake, how are things with you? Did you enjoy the action at the weekend?
Yeah, all good, thanks, Tom. Yeah, was at Newbury on Saturday, so had a good seat inside. Thankfully, didn't have to provoke the rain, which kept on coming in and out. But brutal conditions, but some good action nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, rain, go away, isn't it? Because it has been extraordinarily bad, just constantly how much there is. It's just an inundation of torrents. I couldn't believe, Dan, that they even got Navan on yesterday. It was, I mean, you watch it and you think, oh, that's not exactly edifying viewing.
Yeah, a few seemingly touch and go across the country as well. I think Newbury at a stage was looking as somewhat dicey with the amount of rain they were getting, and it got to a stage where you had confirmed heavy ground horses weren't acting on the ground towards later on in the card. So it really was just a bit of a mess, really. I'm not sure if horses had real festival ambitions, particularly later on in that card, or sort of at a handicap level. Those are the kind of races you wanted to be running in. So, as often, a bit like the DRF, how much of a heavy ground trial is really going to have an impact on spring ground come March? Always going to be a question mark.
Yeah, we'll come to it in a minute, but that end of the Boyne hurdle was it was like watching snails racing against each other, wasn't it? They were finishing so slowly. We're going to start by reviewing the action. Jake, come to you first because we're going to go to Huntingdon on Thursday. Active Innocence getting back on track, winning nicely. Actually, won nicer than I expected. I thought it was a pretty good performance.
Yeah, it was nice, wasn't it? He's a horse that I think most people had him in on their radar for Cheltenham races after his debut, where he kicked away Sinatra in good start at Newbury. Obviously, over Christmas, he kind of blotted his copy, didn't he, behind Manila Yoga. But it was nice to see him get back to winning ways here. Seemingly, the Turner is going to be the target for him. That would obviously make sense with Old Park Star in the same ownership and yard, going for the Supreme either way. Yeah, nice type. Would he be my Turner's winner at this stage? Probably not.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I wouldn't have him for the Turners either. I think next year though he's going to be a really good chaser down. At least that's what Nicky
Yeah.
was saying after the race.
Yeah, but I wouldn't dismiss him in a Turners. I think it's a quite an open race, and it's really refreshing actually that we're looking at mainly Supreme and a Turners. Often in recent years, we've had it's been one pot shot, that's it, and no one's really that interested. But this year, like they're proper open races. Like obviously the Supreme maybe a bit less so, Old Park Star dominating, and his form getting more boosts again this weekend with Glance of Midnight, obviously finishing a good second to Active Innocence. He swatted him out the way in no uncertain terms, and Kingston Queen going on to win the rearranged Jane Seymour as well. So his form continues to look rock solid. I say Active Innocence. He had to beat a fair few rivals. Sinatra was obviously the main rival who tried to make all as his style. Say he's 10-1 for the Turners. I think that's about fair. But it's a fascinating race Ante-Post at the minute, and there are a host of possibles, and you could get quite a big field this year.
I'd say it's unlike the last few years. Almost all the novice races, both hurdles and chases, are looking a lot more open than perhaps they have been in the last few years. Not so many hot pots, I would say, go into it, which is really good. I think it makes it more competitive, more interesting. Okay, on to another novices hurdle. This time it was Sober Glory, who absolutely bolted up. I mean, he obviously goes really well in that ground at Newbury, but I think the runner-up for the Skelton team is probably quite decent. And in the end, Dan, I thought he was very good.
Yeah, he's a horse I think when we did our season preview, we kind of touched on as a horse we were looking forward to. I don't think we were really thinking Supremes or anything like that, and maybe we were thinking a bit further based on how he was performing in bumpers. You thought, and his pedigree 2.5 would definitely suit him, but sometimes you get these horses with such a natural aptitude for attacking, and front running that they can just stick to the minimum distance and they're extremely effective. Obviously, this was 3 seconds quicker than Tutti Quanti was, carrying 2 pounds less. Now, the ground did get worse throughout the day as the rain continued to fall, so not something to take literally, but it was a lovely tactical ride by Harry Cobden as well, who set a pretty strong early pace over the first 5 or 6 furlongs, then slacked it off in the mid part of the race. He'd already had 80% of the field beaten by that stage. Not that many of them on paper had a realistic chance, but then as they went into the straight, he'd saved enough and was able to quicken away actually quite impressively, especially when you compare it to Cadastral. 105% finishing speed for Sober Glory, 98% for Cadastral. Really, really impressive, despite obviously tactically astute ride. He is a very smart horse, and he's going to go into the Supreme now, seemingly. I think you'd want similarly testing ground for him to have a live chance, but again, he adds to a fascinating picture in the Supreme. We've got a couple in there like him who are pretty attacking two-milers. So it looks like it's going to be a proper big field this year. His winning chance probably will be dictated by softer conditions, but he adds to the fascinating picture.
Yeah, Jake, he looks like he wants that softer ground, doesn't he, to be seen at his best?
Oh, he'll need it. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think as Dan kind of just summed that up, really, the most impressive part was the way that Harry Cobden slowed it right back down again. Cadastrell's travelled up onto his girth, and as soon as he hit his girth, Cobden pressed the button and he just shot away and scored by 27 lengths. Like that does take a very good horse to be able to do something like that, regardless of how well or how good the ride was. So yeah, if it comes up a soft ground, heavy ground, Supreme as the current rain would suggest it might do, we shall see. But yeah, he would have a chance in that.
Okay, let's move on to Naas on Saturday. I know you're really excited about this 4-year-old hurdle, Jake. Always very informative, isn't it, as regards the Cheltenham Festival, and of course Saratoga is in there as well. What did you make of the race in general in the end?
Yeah, well, Sober had just finished, and I was already getting my phone out to watch because they hadn't switched the screens across yet to watch the race. Yeah, I was getting quite worried at one point that Saratoga was going to do a Brazil and go and win that. Especially with the way that the camera panned around, up the straight there. It looked like, well, I'm sure he did hit the front at one point. But thankfully Highland Crystal came through. Obviously she was he was getting 7 pounds off of this filly. And she thankfully came through and scored. But I mean, Saratoga's just put in the perfect trial. Obviously, the Irish marks came up today, and he hasn't been given a mark yet, as they quite often do with the 4-year-olds. They're normally pretty stingy about when they give those marks out. So we haven't got a line yet as to where he might end up being for a Fred Winter. But you couldn't not help but be impressed with what he did. Thankfully, obviously, he didn't win in sense of his handicap mark won't be obliterated too much. I'm sure the handicapper is going to know exactly what's been going on here, and it's not going to be like lenient on him, that's for sure. But yeah, very impressed with what he did. I thought that Mark Welsh gave him just the most beautiful ride in terms of getting a
He's
third
done it
qualifying
again.
run in. He has, yeah, and he's now into 5-1 for the Fred Winter, so we're sat on a very good position, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, poor old Mark Walsh, Dan, has got some crabbing of late the last few months about not riding particularly well. But I can tell you one man who's going to be very pleased with what he's done recently is JP McManus.
Yeah, this was quite special, this ride, because he was also such a big late drifter as well. I mean, he's got off 7-1, and he was, I swear, like fours 9-2 for pretty much the entirety of the day. And then I checked the SPs. How's he gone off sevens? And for all the world, he came there to win. And yeah, nice riding into the last hurdle. Ruined all momentum. Nice little switch out, and yeah, and it's also the perfect winner. I mean, I think you're a fan of any of those in behind for the Fred Winter. You are so happy it was Highland Crystal, a 4-year-old filly who's very likable, but giving weight away all round. So you can't really inflate this to much of a high mark for any of them. In fact, you'd probably be looking at other races as a basis for a mark based on pure figures here. Obviously, Munsif, a lot of people will also like. He's obviously a very keen sort, probably wouldn't have liked the ground. Also very good on the flat. I wouldn't be sure about him up the hill, even if he travels into it a bit better and wasn't so keen. He's still doing a lot wrong. I can see why people will like him. It'll be a lot of biker-like comparisons. He was also there just having a third run, so I can get it. Genealogy would be another one who disappointed, but he would definitely want better ground. It was also a decent flat horse. So I think you'll still have those in behind that will be of interest, obviously outside of Saratoga, and I think mark dependent, obviously. It wouldn't surprise me if a few shrewder people try and go in on those others further behind because obviously the price on Saratoga is gone. But I think obviously the selection Jake put up a couple of weeks ago is now one of the major talking horses for a festival handicap.
Yeah, no, he really is. It's good to see. It's good to see the conjecture beginning to start. Kingmaker, I've got down on the running order here that Jake's written Steel Ally and Sam Thomas are the Kings. I would agree. I think they are, Jake.
Sam Thomas is actually unbelievable. So this season, just to keep on reading it out so everybody knows, he's had 21 wins from 60 runners, so 35% strike rate. That's the whole season. It's actually getting ridiculous at this point. We're in February and he's still got a 35% strike rate. It's absolutely mental. Obviously, I'm sure that'll start to go down a little bit once he gets to the spring festivals. But yeah, he's had a hell of a season. Steel Ally, obviously one of the flagship horses for him. Looked like a bit of a match between him and Mambo number five. Mirabad kind of took them along as you'd expect. He ran well enough in second, but Steel Ally, yeah, just took it up. Didn't jump the best he's ever jumped. He was a bit up and down over his fences, I'd say. But you can see how much talent he's got to sort of scoot away and win by 10 lengths. Very nice. I'd imagine that they're going to have to go for an Arkle now. I know Sam Thompson is always very cautious in what targets he's puts forward to the media after the races, and he was doing that once again. But I'm sure they'll take their chance in an Arkle just to see where they're at. And as Dylan Johnson said after the race as well, next season he's going to be one of these horses who can run in all these grade twos over 2.5 miles, and something like the Peterborough Chase or something like that. These races that aren't that strong, he could just mop them up.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any. I think going for the Arkle down would be a sensible option. I think just as Jake says, just to see where you lie with the talent of this horse. But at the same time, you can't be scared of one or two horses going into a race like that. I think it's going to be a good move if they turn up.
He's earned his place. I think in a year where you're looking at Lulamba, who we'll touch on later, and then obviously his main market rival arriving in the back of one run in Kopek de Board, you'd be more entitled to take your chance than most years. And he's just thoroughly likable. And as Jake mentioned, Mirabad made this a proper test, and it got both Mambo and number five notably under pressure. And it also put Steel Ally under pressure. He made a couple of mistakes there and had to dig deep to win. Mirabad, I'm already thinking like the October meeting 2 mile handicap chase would be perfect for him. Just like out in front, early, fresh, loves Cheltenham, at least over hurdles, just ping him around there. He's not quite this level, but he'll pick up a handicap next season, you'd imagine. And I said to Jake at the start of, well, I think after his chase debut or his second chase start, that Steel Ally looks perfect for a Holden Gold Cup at the start of next season, probably. Like a perfect intermediate trip to get him started in a. And God knows, we know Sam Thomas can target an early season race, and it's a big part. So is he proper out and out grade one at 2 miles? Probably not. I think there's more realistic chance of winning a grade one would be the 2.5 at Aintree. But he's perfectly entitled to take his chance. He's thoroughly likable. He's now proven a bit of tactical versatility as well, in that he doesn't have to just make all in his races. So very likable type for them.
Yeah, absolutely right. As is Haiti Couleur for the Rebecca Curtis team, really likable. Won the Denman Chase very nicely. Saw off the old boy in the end along presse and did it really pretty well in the end. I mean, he's likable. He's consistent now. Apart from that Betfair Chase blip, he's pretty much got everything spot on this season. And I think Dan, another one who's well and truly earned their place in a big race. This, of course, being the Gold Cup.
I'd say they're pretty happy they didn't go to the Irish Gold Cup after what happened there. That probably would have dampened the dreams somewhat a bit early. Yep, he's very likable. He was able to dominate this race. He had a few jumping errors throughout, which I think maybe just a lack of competition. And I think I'd backed Long Presse during the week, thinking Django Bay wouldn't run. So I was happy enough with the price, but he was beat straight away. He never went a yard. He jumped terribly, which is so unlike him. And maybe he was feeling the effects of a hard race, obviously in the Cotswolds, but he was never really a viable threat. He even threatened to get involved. He was beaten at the start. So what's he achieved really realistically, Haiti Colors? I've seen some people say it's his personal best. I wouldn't have it anywhere near that. I think it was a pretty routine for him under the circumstances. And I've seen a few also suggest maybe he should have some cheek pieces on or some headgear to help him concentrate, lock those early jumps out that where he was making errors. But he's not going to be able to be allowed the freedom he had here in the Gold Cup. I think he'll be forced to concentrate, whether he likes it or not. Leave of absence back in third, another who shaped quite well under the circumstances, who would not have liked the ground. It was quite well back late on. So, yep, he's perfectly entitled to take his chance in a Gold Cup in a very open year. He'd be more like a native River Star winner, wouldn't he, in terms of proper out and out stayer? I think there might be one or two a bit too classy for him on the day, though.
Yeah, I'm with that opinion as well. Jake, would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, very professional performance, but not on my Gold Cup list, I don't think.
No. Got to talk about Lulamba and the game of spirit. I thought really visually very taking in the end, Jake. And it's a race that Nicky Anderson has loved to target with his really good two milers. And I think Lulamba could really be out of the top draw.
Yeah, he did well, didn't he? He's clearly, to me, a 2.5 mile horse, or going to be in the future anyway. He looked at a bit of trouble leaving the back slash turning for home, that type of area. He just had to be niggled along by Nico, and you were just thinking, oh, what's he going to find, especially on this heavy ground that they were worried about. But despite jumping again a bit up and down, a bit like Steel Ally and a bit like what Lulamba did on his debut at Exeter, a bit up and down just to get in and out of the ground, I think. He still went through with his effort, and as you said, the further they went, the further he drew away to score very cosily. So clearly a horse with lots of talent, clearly a horse who's going to go to an Arkle and have a huge chance. Obviously, one of the talking points after the race was the fact that he got this big cut on his leg as well. Nick Henderson has since come out and said that he's absolutely fine after that. So hopefully that's all cleared up. But yeah, very nice performance, and you can't help but say that he'd have a good chance in an Arkle, albeit hopefully we can have the likes of a Kopek de Boer turn up to take him on.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, Dan, are you thinking he's the most likely winner of the Arkle?
Yes, but you would have some serious caveats still on a sharp 2 miles. I mean, you look. I think sometimes, obviously, race IQ data is either loved or hated in a lot of places. But I think this is actually one of the times it's interesting to look at because he lost lengths at all of the first 9 fences in this race, and the only ones he was making ground at was when everything else was starting to struggle, because you had Master Chewy and Sansagao set very very strong fractions here, which obviously was a great test for him to have, in that he will probably scarcely ever go that kind of 2 mile pace on heavy ground again. So it was a good education for him, but he was losing lengths. Now you translate that to a quicker ground Arkle and a sharper test. That's going to put him in a more complicated position, and also the pace probably won't collapse as drastically as it did on this occasion. Look, for a 5-year-old whose weight for age allowance is diminishing, to put in the performance where he's giving a pound to basically everything bar Master Chewy, he's a fantastic racehorse who's clearly would stay further. But we also said that of Shishkin and Altior, and they just kept winning over 2 miles for the predominantly part of their career. So you'd be foolish to rule him out. Obviously, top class 2 milers often do want further and can stay further. It would be, can he jump properly at 2 mile pace on quicker ground? I think that would have to be an issue on the evidence we've seen.
Yeah. Okay, Dan, I'm going to come straight back to you for the William Hill Hurdle, which was won by Tutti Quanti very easily indeed. And yeah, I guess when you win a Betfair Hurdle like or William Hill Hurdle like he's done, you have to think about the Champion Hurdle.
Oh, you do, because he's going to get slapped with a hefty old rise for this. We don't know it yet. We're recording on the Monday, but it will probably be the best part of a stone, if not more, depending on how generous the handicap is feeling for a race by this stage where the ground had just become a quagmire, really. We had confirmed heavy ground horses just not acting on it at all. He was very well backed again, as he was for the Jerry Fielding, and he had them struggling a long way out. He does hang a lot to his left still. Harry Cobden basically said he's always on one rein effectively for his races, so that would be something to consider moving forward if he was to ever go the other way around. A champion hurdle would be a stretch, even an open year. Again, a bit like Sober Glory, you'd be needing similar conditions if he's to really get involved, because for all that he's improved, you go back to the Supreme and he was out of his ground a mile that day. Like, he only plugged on where he was beaten after a hurdle. So it would have to be a certain set of conditions for him to be competitive in such a race. I think realistically, if you're looking at moving forward, you're thinking this could be a proper 2 mile chaser to watch next year, but seemingly does have to go left-handed.
Yeah, and I guess Jake in an open Champion Hurdle, because it is that this year, they might just think we'll take our chance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've not got a lot to, especially if it did come up soft heavy, as we're alluding to. Like, if it did, then you probably would take your chance, wouldn't you? And see if you can even pick up the place money. You'd probably make a profit on that supplementary fee, wouldn't you? So yeah, you can see why connections are thinking about it. What's there going to be for him after Cheltenham is going to be another question as well, isn't it? With that new mark that we'll find out when this video's up, but we won't know obviously right now.
And pretty much
Yeah.
every other race becoming right-handed or over 2.5 miles. So
Hmm.
it does, yeah, his options do diminish quite drastically after the champion hurdle. But they've said they'll watch the weather. They don't have to supplement him until 7 days
Yeah.
beforehand. So I think if there's soft in the description, give it a go. Why not? One final run for the season and bring him back to be a novice chaser next year.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Jake, come straight back to you for Dino Blue, who did all that she was asked of her, really. She was 8-1 on the Opera Hat, did it very nicely. All roads to the Mayor's Chase now, for which she is the market leader. And I think she'll probably take some beating in that contest.
Yeah, it's an interesting one now, isn't it? Because obviously she's beaten realistically nothing here. She's beating her two owner mates in the green cap and the quartered cap. You know that you're fate with those two most of the time, don't you? Especially in a forerunner race. But yeah, no, Dina Blue obviously 8-1 on Fav, 8-1 on Fav. Went and did what she had to do, as you said. This is her traditional prep, really, isn't it, for the Mares Chase, and she'll go there with every chance. It's just going to be interesting now with Spindlebury, obviously, connections wanting to go to the Grade One Irish Gold Cup. She would win one that I was all over to take Dina Blue on with this year. It's just now that she's had that pulled up effort, it does dampen your enthusiasm slightly, doesn't it? So yeah, as you said, she'll have every chance in the Mares Chase as always.
Yeah, absolutely right. And provided she jumps well, which hasn't always been the case in recent history, she'd have a really good chance. And this week we have a priced up boosted double, and it is Lulamba for the Arkle and Dino Blue for the Mayor's Chase. So if you want to get ahead of the curve, putting those two very strong fancies for their respective races in a double, you can get an extended and boosted price with priced up. Yeah, I said earlier on, Jake, that the Boyne Hurdle on Sunday was watching. It was like watching a slow motion finish. Really, they were so tired in those conditions. But Staffordshire Knott is one game tough customer, isn't he? He's always bringing his sort of stamina sapping game to the table these days.
Yeah, Gordon Elliott's done wonders within this season, really. I thought he was always a bit of a suspect profile horse, and he's suddenly now turned into a bit of a wing machine over 3 miles on soft ground. Picked up 3 wins this season, so fair play. He's a solid improver. Not sure where you'd be aiming him next. I guess going to the ground will dictate, but yeah, he's done really well. And as you mentioned with the ground, I'm just really glad that Gordon Elliott didn't send Honesty Policy here. He was quite keen to get a run into him in the Boyne Hurdle, but as you said, with that heavy ground, slow motion finish, I think even if he'd gone and won the race, you'd kind of then be questioning, does that enhance his stayers profile credentials just purely on the fact that can you come and do that again at Cheltenham? So I think he's kind of done better off, skipping this and going straight to Cheltenham and just getting a race cup gallop in somewhere instead.
Yeah, and Dan, for a horse who at one stage I thought, unfortunately, it was in my head that he'd just gone up the game. The fact that he's now winning Boyne hurdles and has got a real consistent vein of form going, I think is testament to the way that Gordon Elliott has had a season that's gone so well so far.
At one stage, it seemed like he'd gone before he even arrived at the game.
Yeah.
He showed notable promise and then just became more and more mulish as the time went on. But it's just taken a bit of time to get his act together, and he's almost like the second coming of Maxim, who was obviously behind him in the race, but he's going to be that type, you'd imagine. He's going to just pay his way in that kind of discipline, 2.5, 3 miles, deep ground. He'll pop up in some top handicaps when conditions are right and probably run very well. So yeah, he's going to be a bit of a reliable yardstick for them, unbelievably. I didn't think I'd be saying that at the start of the season. And the only one I've wanted probably to mention is Better Days Ahead, who had a lovely reappearance run. Irish National could be on the cards for him, seemingly. He was sixth in the race last year. Obviously, he's got a Grand National entry as well, and I think he got a pound back over fences. So, seemingly, obviously, bigger plans for him, but they'd be very encouraged by that reappearance.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, I think it was a pretty informative race all round, really, but definitely conditions held sway, I think, over the result, as they did with Oscar's brother, who just clearly handled conditions so much better than I think than anything else in the race and the 10 up. Um, a lot of the chat about the race afterwards was concerning the wall park. But Jake, I'll come to you because everyone was saying afterward, a lot of people were saying afterwards, that the wall park is now, thrown his hat in the ring for a handicap at the festival. But it looks like he's going to not get into the 0 to 145 because I think it'd be amazing if he was rated that mark or below, wouldn't it, after that?
Yeah, I'll touch on the winner first, Oscar's brother. I thought he was very good. Obviously, he was going here with the reputation that should be winning a race like this, having been bought by JP McManus. The Cocktail Divan form working out quite nicely. But I thought he put in a really good round. It'd be very interesting to see if they actually take him to the Brown Advisory because I don't think it's a certainty that they will. You'd like to hope that they will, but it's one of those things where they've not committed yet. And he's also in like the Irish National as well. So yeah, we'll see where he goes. The Wall Park, yeah, he's the big talking horse for handicaps now, alongside Saratoga this weekend. obviously I watched him for most of the race, to be honest, and he jumped like a sack of shit, really. It was really, really, really bad. Whether you're saying that's by design or not is up to the punter to decide, isn't it? But really bad round of jumping. Then suddenly, when they got to the home straight, he suddenly started picking them off again and then flew through the field late on. For some reason, the Irish handicappers decided that that was enough to drop him a pound, which I think is crazy. So he's now been dropped to 142 in Ireland. But his last hurdles mark, which they're allowed to take into consideration in Britain, was 155 when he ran at Aintree in April. So it will be very interesting to see how he is weighted. Should connections even be thinking this way? Um, that there was no mention in Gordon Lennox Stables or anything about the Wool Park. So something just to consider. But I'm sure he'll get an entry, and I'm sure they'll test the waters to see if he'll be let into a 0 to 145. I would be erring on the side that even if they gave him 146, that might be where he ends up, just because I think they've been stung before with "I know the way you're thinking," and because of his hurdles racing, that they have every right to give him a higher rating than he does in Ireland.
I kind of hope for the hilarity factor he gets 146. That would be really
There'll be a lot of
funny.
upset people.
Um, Dan, what did you think of Oscar's brother? I thought he was really good. I know that the conditions made him probably look good, but he's a proper likable individual.
He is, yep, and he'll have options moving forward. Obviously, the Brown Advisory is one of them. He also has a Grand National entry, and he needs one more run to qualify for that. And he is already eight, so he would be fairly advanced in terms of a novice chaser in terms of age. So could be one where they run him there, strike while the iron is hot. If he runs respectably in the Brown Advisory, obviously maybe stick him in the national. He'd have a very unexposed profile for it, and he'll be in a mark that would be reasonable. You'd think of the low 150s. He'd have a fair profile. You'd probably say for that race. But as Jake also mentioned, they've probably got options like the Irish national as well. So it's just nice, I imagine, for connections like that to have a horse where they could realistically go one of a few ways and got a very nice attitude. That's for sure.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, lovely, lovely type. I think Oscar's brother. Right, that's our news reviewed. Time for some news updates. Jake, over to you.
Yeah, so the first one obviously is we touched on it last week. Live Conti unfortunately has been confirmed as having a tendon strain, so he's out of the Cheltenham Festival. Yeah, massive shame, but unfortunately that's the things that happen in this game. Um, Last week on Wednesday, we saw Copic de Board, Mr. Giff, Imperet Pass, and Super Sunday all have a school around punches down. A few of those horses we've not seen all season. The likes of an Imperet Pass has kind of been spoken about for the Ryanair. Daryl Jacobs said afterwards as well. So be very interesting to see if those horses come back. Mr. Giff was a one that he's only ran one two offences, but he has a quite a decent looking profile. Away from the Willie Mullins yard, I know the way you're thinking is not certain to be attempting to defend his Grade One crown in the Gold Cup. Gavin Cromwell said that the plans are still a bit up in the air, and they'll have to be very happy with him to send him to Cheltenham. So that's another one to keep an eye on as we head forward. Another thing to keep an eye on is there's plenty of rumours going around about Talk the Talk at the moment. It's obviously very much just a Twitter rumour thing, no official word or anything like that. But there's plenty of rumours saying that Talk the Talk might be sold, and we've seen this before with Simon Munir, Isaac Suede horses now. They are sellers at the right price, and Matit Midi et Soir in France was a prime example of this. He went to Rob Corf now with Henry de Bromhead. So just one to keep an eye on if he turns up in different colours at Cheltenham. Obviously, that would be big news if it does. And just lastly, entries are going to be made this week for the Mayor's Novices Hurdle and the Mayor's Chase as well. So we'll have those next week.
Good stuff, Jake. Yeah, some nice updates there. Obviously, Talk the Talk is one of my big anti-post selections in this series, so I'll be monitoring what happens to him with great interest. Okay, time for anti-post bet number 6 from all of us. And Dan, this week, let's start with you.
And shock horror, it's another handicap. Um, when I'm looking at these markets, like I'm trying to find ones that haven't really formed, or those at the head of the betting, I think you can question and perhaps aren't necessarily either qualified or certain to go. On this occasion, I've looked at the Martin Pipe, and I think actually this market has probably got it about right thus far, and that it's currently focused on two main horses. A Pydanon being the first one, who is the confirmed Skelton horse for the race. Obviously, he'll be getting a fair whack from the handicap of what he did at Newbury over 3 miles the other day, but he's progressing nicely. He'll have his fair chance. He's shown ability to handle Cheltenham already, albeit a different course. So have respect for him. But generally speaking, when you look for the winner of this race, you're looking at high quality Irish novices. And you look down the list of those who are priced up, there are very, very few that are qualified currently. Like it's a very fine list. And those that are, I think you could probably throw stones at a few of them. And so at the current prices, it's very odd for me to be going at top of their betting for a handicap, but the passing wife at 12 to 1 non-runner no bet just currently to me stands out as a really, really fair bet and one you could see drastically shortening before the off, as we've seen so many of these types do. I say he ticks a lot of the boxes traditionally what you'd look at. He was a very fair bumper horse a couple of years ago with form behind the likes of Redemption Day. He won a couple of times in the summer of 2024 as well, so he suggests he's pretty ground versatile. His first start actually did come over hurdles, but they reverted to bumpers when he was behind De Capo. He then missed all of last season before reappearing at Gowran over 2 miles in what is clearly now a very high class piece of maiden hurdle form, where he was third to Skylight Hustle and the Devil You Know, and actually went off favourite for that race that day. Keith and Jack probably got into a sustained battle a bit too soon there on Skylight Hustle and the passing wife, and it helped the Devil You Know, who was given a more patient ride, to pounce late on. But Skylight Hustle now obviously maybe a slightly fortuitous Grade 1 winner, but clearly a high class novice who goes to the Turners as a very live contender. The Devil You Know, we saw what he did in the River Don recently as well, so that is rock solid form, especially for a maiden hurdle. He was on a very good third in the Royal Bond to Cocktail Brew and Blake, who have proven probably just to be a few lengths off the major Grade 1 players in that division. As we saw at the DRF, they were sort of in a bunch, fourth or fifth, but the passing wife was outpaced that day and stayed on really nicely. And you look at him, he's always looked like a type who would definitely appreciate further. So it was a slight surprise they actually persisted with 2 miles when he went to the Grade 1 at Christmas, where he was just never really competitive. And you've got to bear in mind as well that during this entire time, the Cromwell team had been struggling quite notably. So for him to be running to a level where third in that maiden hurdle, a very fair run in the Royal Bond as well, it suggested that there could be a fair bit more upside to come. And we last saw him at Punchestown behind the very well touted Dr. Dumanil up in trip to 2 mile 3 on heavy ground. Only a 4 runner race, but obviously Dr. Dumanil came with a fair reputation and went off a short price. The passing wife was always travelling in behind him very, very well, loomed up going well 2 out and won in what was effectively a canter in the end. And I think the talk after that was he went into the race on a mark 136, that he might have just completely blown his mark there with a view to a handicap and it might have forced him into graded company. But he only went up £3 to a mark 139. And I think when you grade him on his 2 mile form alone, that's probably about fair, considering you've got Blake and Cocktail Brew is 139 and 140 respectively now. So on that alone, it looks fine. But what you'd say with him is that there should be an awful lot more to come over further. Like he's very much like a horse, so 2 miles, 2.5 miles, even up to 3 miles in time would very much suit. And also when you add to it that the yard was struggling during the time of a lot of his runs, there's clearly a fair bit of upside remaining for him. He's not in any of the Grade 1s at Cheltenham. For whatever reason, they didn't decide to enter him, which was an interesting choice, so barring a supplementary. And I don't think he'd actually look out of place in a Turners whatsoever. I think if he turned up there, he would run very creditably. But it now looks more likely he's going to go down the handicap route, which effectively leaves the Coral Cup or the Martin Pipe. The last 5 years, if you look at the Cromwell runners in those races, he's had 2 in the Coral Cup that went off 14 to 1 and 25 to 1. He's had 3 in the Pipe, and 2 of them were 9 to 2 and 13 to 2. So traditionally, like most Irish trainers, the more fancied runners tend to go for the Martin Pipe while they can. Obviously, you're also looking at jockey bookings, who's going to be available in terms of conditionals to ride, and you'd say probably Connor Stonewall should be top of that list. Obviously, often gets good opportunities for Gavin Cromwell. He was second on the company sergeant in the plate last year. He's been 5th and 6th in the last 2 renewals of the Martin Pipe as well, and he'd be one of the more experienced conditionals in that race by some distance now. So he would be a very good booking for something like that race. He's 12 to 1 now, but you look at some of the horses in recent years who were the fancied Irish protagonists, the likes of Woodhoo, for example, Waterford Whispers as well. Better Days Ahead obviously won the race. They often go off 3 to 1, 4 to 1, 9 to 2. I can see him going off a very similar price, especially in the absence of many other main Irish rivals. So I can see him going off drastically shorter. And I think 12 to 1 actually, seemingly, while he is favourite, I would half expect him to be a fair bit shorter already.
Okay, yeah. I mean, brilliant case made, Dan. Very comprehensive as always. And wish you best of luck. with that, the passing wife. And do you know what? I love it on the jump show when there's a little bit of agreement between Jake and Dan, and the great minds come together as one. Because I know that Jake, you've got a similar thinking that the passing wife is going to run well.
Yeah, I think me and Dan were talking about. I think it's the first time since Chianti Classico, but we are going to be agreeing on the selection and both putting it up on the show. So yeah, the passing wife, completely agree. I was very worried after he thrashed Dr. Deluminil that the handicapping might go a bit wild on that, and with only getting a £3 rise, I'd say that's pretty much bang on where you need to be in terms of to get into the pipe. Obviously, he'll be towards the top of the weights rather than having you know, an extra couple of £7 in hand or whatever. But I think that the way that he's shown that he handles 2.5 miles and hopefully is improved for 2.5 miles is very good. Obviously, he absolutely hacked up on the bridle the last day. Um, so yeah, I think he's got everything in his favour. I'm not going to go over the case again because Dan has mentioned it all. But yeah, we're going to have a double selection and we'll be waiting till the last race to see if we can collect.
A bit like last year when you had Woohoo, we all waited for
Yeah.
with eagerly. But the good thing for me is that obviously the last time we did this was Chianti, at least the we can remember. Obviously on that day we were there, and obviously I lifted you into the air and immediately strained my back. This time I won't be there on the Friday, so I'll either have to find someone similarly heavy to lift and ruin my back again, or I'll save it for another day. But no, the only other one I looked at Frankie John for this race, and then the more I looked at it, I thought you could just back the passing wife at 12s, and he just has a far more convincing, solid profile at this stage. So I'll be keeping an eye on Frankie John if he goes down this route, but that 12-1 was too good to turn down.
Yeah, it's definitely a
And
race where, like, if something develops and something else gets parachuted in suddenly, then you definitely would take notice. But at this stage, I ran through all the Irish novices yesterday. Willie Mullins, pretty much the only one you could really have in there is Plasta Lanashion, and she's probably going to go for the Mayor's Novice, isn't she? So, that there's very, very limited options at this stage, that's for sure.
yeah, absolutely, Jake. And I don't think we're quite done there, are we, with the passing wife for you this week?
No, yeah, I will also put up an actual case as well for another selection. And I'm going to be going to the county hurdle this week. And it's another market where it's been a bit more developed. Obviously, unfortunately, Liv Conti was up there and he's no longer in it. But, there's still Mercia has kind of taken his place and filled that frame of being favourite for the county. And as much as I really like Mercia, my one concern I have with her is that I think the DRF was the day that they mapped out for her to be winning. And Paul Townend took his only handicap rider the whole weekend. Whether she handled conditions or not, she was still there to try and win the race, and she picked up fine for fourth place. It's just I think if it came up soft at the festival, you'd start to worry how much she would have in hand and how much she would be able to improve and go on again at the Cheltenham Festival. As much as she's a likable mare and would have a similar profile to Cargies last year. So Marcia, I can leave definitely for now. Potentially, one for the day if nothing else comes out of the woodwork. But she's not one that's too high on my list. And I started a joke is also in there, who is interesting. But I would say that he would probably want to be going up in trip rather than staying over 2 miles. Obviously, I don't know which direction they're thinking of him, but that would be the way I would be thinking about it. So couple of options there towards the head of the market who are look a bit windy. You've also got Rock Dino who's in and around the gaff, but I do wonder how he's going to be rated, and he might not actually get a rating high enough to get into a race like this, depending on if it fills. Something worth noting is the maximum field has been lowered by 2 this year, so just all little different bits and pieces of things that are adding up. And Willie Mullins is obviously the king of this race. Him and Dan Skelton have unbelievable records. And one of the Willie Mullins horses that I thought was very interesting with a view to this is Carbell, the French recruit for last season for Barnard Stud. And he just looks like a type of horse who is been mapped out for a race like this. And obviously, Willie doesn't tend to map out too many handicappers, you'd have to say. But this seemingly is one of the races he does it for. But if you look through his form last season, made a good hurdles debut over 2.5, where potentially he didn't really stay, but drops back to 2 at Punchestown and absolutely bolts up by 16 lengths. So that's kind of the trip that they then aim him at for the rest of the year. Goes to Cheltenham for the Supreme on only his third start in Britain and Ireland, and he ran a very average race in 10th. It was nothing special. It was on the old course, which obviously would be moving to the new course for the county. I think you can give excuses for a 40-1 shot running in 10th place in a Supreme where there's much more fancied runners for the yard. So that wasn't great, but what also happened is he then went to Aintree on some better ground. And this is where he really showed the type of horse he can be, where he finished in third place behind Salvador Mundi and Romeo Coolio. Now he actually had a rating of 140 from the BHA that day, obviously, so it'll be higher now due to this run, but it was a really, really good effort, But Salvador Mundi obviously ended up going and winning it very nicely. He was a good winner on the day. Romeo Coolio, obviously, we know he's not a out and out two miler. He's improved massively for fences either way. But to get, just behind those two rivals, albeit at Aintree rather than Cheltenham, was still a very good effort. And then he finished his season at Punchestown, where he ran in the Grade 1 there, the day that Ironsi suddenly sprouted wings and decided to be the horse that he promised to be on the gallops. And he beat Salvador Mundi, but Carball was only 3 lengths behind in third. And he actually had to switch out really wide to get around Kopek de Board, who was going backwards. And obviously he had his blip that day, didn't he, where he ended up finishing fourth, beaten a mile. But when he was fading back through the pack, Carball had to really switch outside to not lose any ground himself. So he was definitely inconvenienced. Ironsi was obviously the clear winner on the day, but Carball ran in third. And then we've not seen him since until Nace the other day in January, where he ran in the Limestone Lad over Grade 3, over 2 miles. It was really heavy ground. He got sent off the even money favourite, which I found interesting because I was wondering if this would just be a bit of a pipe opener with the spring in mind, considering how much he improved for the spring last year. But I thought he ran really well in second. Obviously, Glenn Kiln went and won it, and he's been a horse who's been proven over further, been proven in heavy conditions before, and would have, had race fitness on side, everything in his favour to go and run a massive race. And he obviously went through with it and won by a length. And Carball, didn't do anything wrong finishing second. Since then, he's been left on a mark of 146, which in Ireland, which I like. I wouldn't imagine he would get too much more than that from the British handicap. I don't think he's got a profile where you're looking at him going, oh, this horse has been absolutely plotted to get to the county hurdle, and we need to give him an extra 4 or 5 rather than an extra 2 or 3. So I'd say you're looking at the high 140s, low 150s for him for a county. And I think with him, he's the type of horse that Paul Townend might end up going with just purely based on the fact that he's got that back class, he's got that spring ground form, and Mercia might just have had her day and disappointed. So lots in his favour, 20-1, non-runner no bet. I think he is a good play for the county.
Yeah, well, I thought you ran really well actually in defeat last time, to be honest. I know he was sent off a short price, but I thought it was a good run behind a horse who's very, very consistent at that kind of level. Good stuff, Jake. For my selection this week, I'm taking you on, and I'm going to go with 6.5 for the county, which probably dredges up some horrible memories for Jake after last year finishing second in the Mayor's Novices Hurdle behind Air of Entitlement, for which she looked all the world like she was going to win, and then just didn't quite see it out as well as the eventual winner. I've always been I know this is the jump show, but I've always been a bit of a sucker, I'm afraid, for a decent flat horse going hurdling, and she certainly is that. I mean, she's rather bucked the trend in a way because she shouldn't really be as good as she has been on the flat. She's got a proper jumping pedigree, and her dam was a winner over hurdles. Her sire is a jump sire in the main, and she's, I think, probably surprised a few how much speed she's got. Eventually finished third in the Irish Cesaro, which was a mighty run, and was rated 94 after that. So that in itself shows you just how talented she is. Not many horses get to that kind of rating, and not many horses get to that kind of rating who are then emboldened by going towards a different code. So they decided to go hurdling with her, and she made her hurdles debut Fairy House when she was very impressive, beating the Smart Qualamita very easily. Then, of course, we know went to the Mayor's Novices Hurdle and just got run out of it, and ran a really good race after that, Punchestown thereafter. The wheels sort of came off for her a bit after that. She was beaten 22 lengths and 14 lengths in very valuable handicaps on the flat, including again the Ara Cesarovich. But I think you can possibly put that down to the fact that, as Dan mentioned earlier on in his case, that Gavin Cromwell just hasn't really been firing, and that really bad run by her Put Your Hands Together came in September. She made her hurdles reappearance at Sligo behind Colonel Mustard. Didn't think ran too badly, given the fact that we know that Colonel Mustard is a slightly more improved and consistent horse this year. She ran pretty well, I think, for second there on her return to hurdling. She was sent off 3-1 on favourites, so was expected to win, but it wasn't a run that was completely dire. And then she went to Leopardstown. I thought she was bang there, really, until her stamina just ebbed away over the extended 2.5 miles behind Wadu. That was over Christmas. I'm really quite glad that she's had a break since then, because I think she is better after a break. We've seen that a couple of times in her career, perhaps most notably when she made her hurdles debut at Fairyhouse. She'd been off for 4 months before that, after that third in the Irish Says, and was a really fresh horse. I also think she might well be a spring horse, given how good she was at that time of year last year. And I think spring ground is important to her. She's had that in the main so far this term in 2 of her starts. But as I say, I think she was a little bit extended by that extra trip last time. Hasn't run since Christmas. So if going to the county, then she should be a fresh horse. Now, I know that Gavin Cromwell is targeting Hello Neighbour at the race. There's no reason at all why he won't run 2 horses in there. And my main thinking behind her now is that she's off 136 official rating over in Ireland. She might get taxed for that. I reckon she'll be no more than 140, though, tackling the county hurdle. And for a horse she's rated as high as 94, she's now rated 90, but who has been as high as 94 on the flat, that just leaves her really well handicapped, in my opinion. Back at Cheltenham, over the shorter trip, and she's the kind of filly or mare now, of course, being 6, for whom a really strong pace in the big field, I think, is ideal. We've seen that multiple times now. We saw it when third in the Irish Says. We saw it in that 23 runner Mares Novices hurdle last year. I think it allows her to settle that little bit better and get a nice toe into the race. All eyes, of course, are going to be on her finishing effort if she gets to a position inside the final furlong where she's got a very good chance. She's going to have to be held on to as long as possible, but hopefully she will be. And just I think she's nicely treated. Has now got the 5 runs, so she qualifies just for the county. And yeah, hopefully she can put any bad memories of last year behind her and go well in the county. So that's my selection this week.
So is your strategy now just to put up horses we put up last year and just find valid targets for them?
It's the perfect blueprint.
I'm trying to think who could be next, because I mean, we put up Cargies probably for the Arkle, I imagine. Did you project? No, we didn't put her up.
I didn't put her up, man.
No, you'll figure it out, I'm sure. Also, you two of you jumping in my county hurdle grave like this is just insulting.
Yeah, sorry,
damn you both.
I did think that is
opportunistic.
I waited until it was a non-runner at least, rather than jumping in beforehand.
Yeah, if you'd gone last week when it was just a rumor, that would have been really insulting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff, lads. Right, that brings us to the end of the show, I think, this week. As mentioned, next week we're going to be reviewing all the selections we've made so far. So that's always a fun episode to tune in for. And as always, please remember to like and subscribe. We'd love to get to 250 with this episode, likes-wise, and nearly at that 4,000 mark subscription-wise. So yeah, support, keep it coming, and do comment below with your thoughts on what we've talked about this week. And yeah, looking forward to next week. For now, though, on The Jump Show, it's goodbye.